Hello everybody, my name is Andy Geverts. I'm the program leader for the Brown Bag Recruiter Initiative, and you are watching a very short presentation called The Rule of 5 Degrees. It's part of our Playing by the Rules series, which is brought to you courtesy of Zoom Info. For those that are unfamiliar with what we're all about at Brown Bag Recruiter, I would invite you to go online and check us out. You'll see that we're doing a number of things which include, of course, trying to develop a systematic approach to the business of recruiting, and part of that is the development of a rules-based system, so that in those instances where we may not necessarily know what we should be doing next, we've got a set of guiding principles which we can fall back on. So this rule of 5 degrees is part of that, if you will. And the rule of 5 degrees, very simply stated, says that to reach your destination, you must set your course and be true to your guiding principles. So we'll see if we can explain a little bit about what that really means and how we can apply that in our day-to-day activities. But first, let me see if I can just explain one or two things that will give us some context. And I'm sure many of you may already know this, and there may be one or two people who, like I was at the beginning, unaware of this. There is a subtle difference between true north, magnetic north, and grid north, although it's not a subtle difference, of course, if you're lost in the desert. But for the purposes of understanding this rule of 5 degrees, let me see if I can define the difference between these directions, which aren't always going in the same direction. So true north, if you can imagine drawing a line from the North Pole to the South Pole, if you were following that in a northerly direction, you'd be going in the direction of true north. And of course, at night, if you look at the North Star, that would mark in the night sky the direction of north. Again, not much help if you're in the desert at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but for those that are nocturnal or navigate by night, the North Star is a pretty good marker in the night sky. Magnetic north, on the other hand, is that direction north in the direction of the magnetic North Pole. So if you have a compass and you're following a compass, you're typically going to be walking in the direction of the magnetic North Pole and going magnetic north. And grid north, on the other hand, is that northerly direction that you'd be following if you had drawn a line, a grid line, if you will, on a map. So we'll come back and explain why that's important to understand in a moment. But let me just see if I can expand on this notion of the rule of 5 degrees and suggest that if you make a very small error at the point of departure, oftentimes it's hardly noticed. But once you're actually going on your journey and you've detected that there's an error been made, then the time and the effort that it takes to get back on track can oftentimes sap all your energy and resources, and that in itself leads to a whole set of challenges and frustrations that weren't anticipated at the beginning. And oftentimes, if we find ourselves in a reactive mode, it's because we didn't recognize that at the outset there was a small mistake that we could have easily rectified at that point, and we've tracked down the road and now find ourselves having to make corrections. So let me also now come back to the whole notion of magnetic north, true north, and all that good stuff, and see if we can use that as a metaphor, if you will, for the kinds of behaviors that we exhibit as recruiters. So if you will, magnetic north as that set of behaviors, those default behaviors, if you will, that suggest that presented with a problem or an opportunity, we have a tendency to gravitate to those things that we're most comfortable with, or maybe those are the things that we've always done. So we may recognize that they're not always the best things for us, but we do them anyway. So that's our default behaviors, magnetic north, if you will. And true north might be those set of behaviors that would be described as best practice. And even though in reality it's very difficult to find a circumstance where you can actually apply a best practice, theoretically it sounds good, but in reality oftentimes it's very difficult to translate. Nonetheless, those behaviors that are articulated in the concept of a best practice we could describe as true north, perhaps. And then grid north would suggest that if we've gone through a planning process and we understand the things that we're going to need to do in order to execute our plan and get where it is that we want to go, we've got a set of behaviors that we can describe as our planned behavior, if you will, grid north. So there's a little metaphor for you to muse on as we try and illustrate now the rule of 5 degrees. So here on the left we can see that we've got magnetic north going off a little cockeyed there, and true north, of course, going in the centre would be those behaviours that are articulated in best practice or process, and grid north would be the direction northward that we've defined as part of our plan. And you can see here at the beginning, if you look down the beginning, the actual difference here between magnetic north and true north, I mean, it really is a marginal difference, and sometimes it's as little as 5 degrees, which is where this rule gets its name from. And as we begin our journey, it really is sometimes an indiscernible difference. But as we continue to go down the track and as we're going through the recruiting process, you can see that in actual fact the gap widens to the point that if we're detecting now in the selection steps that we've got a problem, coming back is going to obviously require a lot more time and energy than if we had detected the problem at the screening step or even at the sourcing step. So obviously the further we go down the track, the more problematic it becomes. And clearly once we've started the business of recruiting and hiring the wrong people, then we've got a situation where we're trying to address problems associated with engagement and retention, and typically those are enormously challenging problems to overcome and not nearly as easy to manage as the problems that we can identify here at the profiling step. So there's a little illustration of what the rule of 5 degrees looks like, and suggests that if we want to try and fix problems or bridge the gap between what we should be doing and where we're going, it's probably easier to do that at the beginning rather than at the end. So there you have the rule of 5 degrees, just very quickly to summarise then, and to borrow a phrase from my friend Stephen Covey, we should always be starting with the end in mind. So at the beginning, at the profiling step, we need to be very explicit about defining and stating exactly who it is that we're looking for. We need to understand exactly what competencies the candidate should possess, the kinds of skills, the experiences and the attitudes that they should be able to demonstrate, and also there's some demographic profiling that we need to understand in terms of where the candidates are going to be distributed and so forth. And then once we know who we're looking for, it follows then that we should know where we can go about finding them. And then once we've done those two things, begin to understand the most effective ways to attract these candidates to us, and through the process of screening and selection, understand how we can further engage the candidates and qualify them so that once they come on board, we've set their expectations realistically and can satisfy their needs so that they're thoroughly engaged and delighted to be part of what we've created for them as recruiters. So there you are. That's the rule of 5 degrees. Very simply, set your course and stay on it. And remember, even people who don't know where they're going eventually end up somewhere. And that really just about wraps it up. So again, do visit online at brownbagrecruiter.com if you'd like to learn more about the program and if you'd like to find some of the goodies that we've got there for you. And do take a moment to go online and visit our friends at zoominfo.com and drop them a line and let them know if you'd like to take advantage of their offer of a trial that I sent you. So once again, thanks for your time. Have a lovely day. And this is me signing off. Thank you very much.